Hey guys, here's a video to to walk you through the basics for triangles, and we'll start out with how to classify the triangles. Okay, that's one of the goals you're going to have, as well as finding the different measures. But let's just start with the various classifications. So there's the definition for triangle, and there's two different ways you can classify triangles. You can actually classify them by their lengths or by their angles. All right, so we'll start out with the lengths. You've got three different classifications here, and if you look at the tick marks, it kind of gives away the relationships for each one. So for scalene, you see there's no marks at all, because in a scalene triangle you have no congruent sides. Okay, nothing at all, just literally like three different marks, if at all. They might not even be marked, but if there's no congruent sides, that's scalene. Isosceles is when you have at least two congruent sides, so at least two congruent sides. And then equilateral is when all three are actually the same. So all three congruent sides. And that's how you classify it by its sides. All right. Technically, an equilateral triangle is also isosceles, but you always try to give the best name for it, the most accurate name, and equilateral is the most accurate. Now, we could also classify by their angles. Okay. You have an acute triangle, a right triangle, obtuse triangle, and equiangular triangle. Well, we've learned these terms before. We know what acute, right, and obtuse are. And equiangular should be kind of obvious if you followed what equilateral was. Instead of it being equal sides, it's equal angles, and you can see it in the picture. So acute, imagine that. It's got all three acute angles. A right triangle has one right angle. Of course, it can only have one, really, because if it had two, that would be 180 degrees already, and a triangle can only have 180 total, so it would only be one. Obtuse has one obtuse angle. Now, you might quickly, react to that and say, wait, shouldn't it be all three? But again, if you've got an obtuse angle, that means that you have an angle over 90, and you can't have more than one of those. If you did, you wouldn't be able to fit all the degrees inside. You'd have more than 180. And equiangular are all three angles congruent, which by default means they have to be how many degrees? Right? If you have 180 and you got to split it up three ways, that would be 60 degrees each. But they are technically, you can just say they're congruent. You don't have to always use the 60. All right, so that's how you classify. Let's do a couple quick examples. I'm just looking at this picture. They want me to classify by its sides and its angles. So I'm looking at the sides. I have 19, 8, and 23. Well, clearly those are all different. So this is at least scalene. So it's a scalene. And I have two angles that are below 90, but one angle that's above 90. That means I have an obtuse angle. So this is an obtuse scalene triangle, or however you want to say it. I don't know why, but I usually put the angle one first. Oops. Obtuse. Obtuse. Scalene triangle. Okay? How about this one? Look at the sides. 4, 4, and 4 times the square root of 2. Well, that's definitely not just 4, but these are the same, right? Those are the same. So I look back and I see that when I have at least two congruent sides, that's isosceles. And if I look at the angles, I do see I have a 90-degree angle right here, which means I have a right triangle. So I have an isosceles right triangle. Isosceles right triangle. Or a right isosceles triangle. I guess I wasn't really consistent there, which one I said first. I think it's just the way it sounds. For some reason, saying scalene obtuse doesn't roll off the tongue, but an obtuse scalene triangle rolls off the tongue. It doesn't matter. As long as you classify by its sides and its angles, let me just focus that a little better, then you've done it correctly. Okay? And that's the basics for classification. All right, if you have any questions, be sure and let me know, and stay tuned for the next video.